Okay, hello, I'm Richard. I'm going to be going over Blender, and this is the first time I've done it, so it's just going to be a little overview of how to get started. I know when I started, it was really daunting. It was hard to figure out, and so I'm going to go slow and model some stuff, and if anybody jumps on, they feel free to ask questions. I'll answer as I go, and keep an eye on things. So I am using Blender 2.7, and when you first open it up, this is what you see. You get a box and you get a camera, and that's this guy here. That's where your camera's looking from, and you have this light. So it's this one over here. And first thing you're probably going to do is you're going to open this up, and you're going to see this, and you're going to click like that. And okay, so this thing moves. And that's not too very helpful, is it? So you just want to select something like this camera. You have to right-click. So let's get started with that. And then you right-click your cube, and that's great. So you can scroll in and out with your mouse wheel. You can select your camera, select your light, and if you click with your mouse wheel, you rotate around a center point. Now you'll notice up here it says user perspective because we have 3 vanishing points, one going out this way, one going out this way, and one going straight down. That's how most people paint and work, and that's generally a good way to model as well, but sometimes you want a different perspective, so you can change it to orthographic where the lines are the same just by pressing 5. Let me turn on screencast keys so you can see what I'm doing. And we'll get to all that here in a second. So now down here you'll be able to see what I'm pressing. And 5 on your number pad will toggle from perspective to orthographic. And you'll notice I can zoom into my box here with my scroll wheel. And oh, it's breaking because I'm zooming in on the center point, and it's actually like moving the camera forward. But if I need to do really fine detail work, I'll switch to orthographic. Now it's like I'm using a telephoto lens. It's not going to zoom inside the cube, it's just going to get you really, 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 really close. So that's kind of the difference. See, now I'm back inside the cube because I switched to perspective. And then, okay, that's great, so we have a cube. First couple of months, I didn't know what I was doing really, and I would sit here not knowing how to change this cube into anything, and I would call it a stupid effing cube. So you see all these buttons over here, and you click them. Oh, now I'm moving the cube. Click rotate, and now it's rotating. Okay, great. Scale, it gets bigger and it gets smaller. Those are helpful, but you'll probably use hotkeys for that instead. It gets a lot easier if you just use hotkeys. And then mirror, well, that didn't do anything. We can go over that later. It's probably not going to be used that much to begin with until you start getting into like modeling faces and things like that need to be symmetrical on both sides. So then, okay, we have this edit drop down. Duplicate. Oh, now I have another one, and I'll click to place it. Now I have 2. That's great. Delete, of course, deletes. Duplicate linked. Let's select that one. There you go. Now, if I do something to this one, like that, see, it does it to the other one too. That's the difference. And there's easier ways to do this than using the buttons. I'm just doing the buttons first because, well, you can see them. They're easy. They're right here. So set origin join, we're not really going to go over that. Shading, smooth or flat, that's how light reflects off it. Now it looks like there's not really any corners. Because it's a box, it's hard to make it look smooth and rounded. But this is helpful if you're modeling faces or anything organic, or like a tire that has smooth, round edges, but you don't want to use a lot of polygons. It'll give it that illusion of smoothness because it takes the average of the direction this side is facing and this side, and it makes the light shine off of them of the average of the two, instead of just bouncing here and bouncing there. So then we can hit flat, and it's back. You can see all the sides. And then, of course, undo, redo, all of that. Repeat last is handy, but I didn't really do anything. So if I do this, and I can repeat last, and now I have another one over there, and again, like that. Control Z, of course, undoes. Control Shift Z is your redo. And again, middle mouse button rotates around. You select with the right mouse button. So that's great. We have a cube, and you can't really do much. You have these arrows here. If you grab one of the arrows, you can move it. You see you have the red and the green as well. Those are your axes, your X and Y. You have it down here as well to help orient you. And you can move things by grabbing those arrows. But there's all these buttons down here as well. And there's all these tabs over here on this side. And what's this up here and all this over here, and there's all these buttons. It's a lot to take in, and I got overwhelmed not knowing what to use, how to use it, or when. So let's start right now with modes. You're in object mode. That's where you start first. Let's start a new file, get rid of all this, and you'll see this. And if I haven't said it already, I'm in Blender version 2.70, because I know 2.1 is coming out soon. So we are in brand new file and object mode. You can see it right here. There's a few different modes, and let's go over those real quick. You'll start an object, and this is where you add new things, and then you can edit them in, well, it's called edit mode. Now you see I have these little dots at the edges of the lines that I can select. Those are my vertices, and they're connected with edges. Now I have this orange, it's an edge. I can pull an edge like that, or I can change the vertices like that. And we can change the shape this way. It's a lot easier changing things in edit mode than it is in object mode. And then we have sculpt mode, which that's a bit more intermediate, where you can sculpt shapes into this cube, just like a sculptor would a piece of clay or stone. Vertex paint, weight paint, texture paint, those I would recommend holding off on. Pretty much you just need to worry about object mode and edit mode to begin with. That's where you'll do most of your shaping with the polygons and changing things. So let's go ahead and make something. Well, first let's talk about these real quick. Sorry. This here's the outliner. This shows what's in our scene. See, we have our scene, and in it we have a few different things. So let's grab here, and we can drag this out so you can see it better. We have the render layers, which you're not really going to need to worry about too much to begin with. You have the world, which is all this gray space around your cube. And you can edit that. See that symbol there, that little globe? You see that same symbol down here. And, well, it's the same thing. This is where you edit your world settings. You have your camera. And if you click on it, you have a camera down here where you can edit your camera. And that's for setting up your render, which is the image of your 3D model that you make. And we'll go into that in just a bit later. You have cube. This here shows that it's a mesh. And if we look here, you have a mesh, and these are some of your different settings for that. You won't really need to do too much in here to begin with. And your lamp, that's your light right here. It shows that it's a sun, and its size, and this is its direction. See where it's pointing? So that we can change that to get different shadows on things, so that when we render from right here, see, that's where our render is looking, where our camera is looking, and the sun is coming in from this side. It'll get us some nice shadows. That's our outliner. As we add things, this can get really complex. You can add particle effects, physics, all types of stuff, and it'll kind of show up here. So, whoops, I just got rid of that. See, it's very modular. You can just grab these little things to, if you move it up, see I have an up arrow, and I get rid of that window, but I can drag down and add it again. Right here, you'll see that here, 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 and up here are what your windows are. So let's turn this one back into the outliner. And now we have it back. And this one here, see that symbol? It says properties. This is our properties panel. This here has that symbol. It's our 3D view. And this has that symbol. Yours will start on the timeline. And the timeline down here, it doesn't really do anything right now. It's best for, like, if you do physics or if you're going to do animation, you can set up your different frames and things and play it till it gets to a point that you want, and then you can pause it and work on the model from there, or things like that. So anyway, we still haven't made anything. Well, great. So, oops, my screencast keys got turned off when I started a new file, sorry. And right here, this is your properties shelf. It's still kind of messy, it needs a redesign, and hopefully in the future this will get better. Right now it's just your properties. I mean, you want to transform, I've got my lamp selected, so select the box, and that'll move it along the x-axis. You know, that one along the y. If you want to lock it, then you can grab it, but you can't drag it along the y. You can take it everywhere else, just not along the y. And I'm just grabbing it with the right mouse button and clicking. There's better ways to do that, which I'll show you in a little bit. Rotation, it's the same thing. You can rotate it around any axis, specifically by degrees. Scale, how big you want it to be. And the scale is in Blender units, so they generally, you can think of it as like a meter for each one of these little squares here. So your starting cube is 2 meters by 2 meters. 6 meter cube. You could fit a person inside it. Or, I'm sorry, about 6 foot cube. You could probably comfortably fit a human inside it. And it doesn't really matter what scale you work on, so long as that you finish in the right scale for what you need. If you're going to export to a game engine, you might check with that game engine. If you want to use it with some other models, you want to make sure they're all to the same scale before you put all the files together. It's not really too big a deal so long as it looks right, and you can make things exact with measurements, which that's a little bit more advanced. Probably won't go over that here. So, and then this here, these are your properties. We have, let me drag this over. This sets up your render. It's your camera, it sets up your render, and there's not too much that you need to worry about. Let's, right here, this is what it saves the file as. PNG, that's what I recommend. I like it the best. I think it gives you a really nice small file size with good image. RGBA allows for an alpha channel for transparencies. I just generally leave this on that setting so that we know if we have an alpha channel, it'll be included, so I don't have to worry about switching it back and forth. Compression, color depth, those are things that you can get into if you really need them. But sampling, this here is going to be the quality of your render. Under samples, this is how many different times they look at each pixel and where the light's coming from for it. So if you do 10, let's say, you'll get, here, I'll do it in the viewport here. Shift-Z shows you what it's going to look like rendered. See, that's pretty plain, pretty basic. And this is my preview. Since it's in the viewport, it's not a final render, so I can change my preview from 10 to, let's say, 50. And you'll see it counting up to 50 here. It's going through all the samples. And it's hard to tell a difference because it's pretty basic. But let's say I do 2 and switch it off and back on. You see how it has some noise here, how it gets noisy and kind of speckledy gray as I move it around. You'll see a lot of that in your renders the lower your samples are. Oops, there we go. So I generally leave preview at 25, and I'll put my render at maybe 50 to start with, because you'll probably render a few times to make sure everything's set up correctly, that your lighting is the way that you want it. And doing 50, that's a pretty fast render to start with. Something else that you can do is come up here to supported and experimental. Just make sure that's on supported, and then we can go to, oh, it doesn't have it. Okay, let's go to File and Properties, User Preferences. There's something right here with, where is it? System, here at the end, down here in this corner, Compute Device. If you have an NVIDIA card, like a GTX, I have a GTX 650. It's not the fanciest card in the world. It's it's like the first of the GTX models, so it's not amazing, but it does me pretty well. See, it says right here GeForce GTX 650. So I can render with my graphics card instead of with my CPU, which helps me out a lot, and then just save user settings. And in here in your user preferences, I'll close that out, go back to it, File, User Preferences. There's a lot of stuff that you can change. It's very customizable. You can change it all different ways. I'm not going to be changing it just so that most people can follow along. See, like, we can change the size of the mini axis down here in the bottom corner. You see that getting bigger and smaller? We can change how bright it is so that you barely see it or see it a lot. And then you can just change all different types of things. I like to go into editing, and if you have a pretty good system that you're pretty confident in, you can change this undo all the way up to 64 steps so that you will have a lot of undos. That comes in really handy if you're going a certain direction and you don't know if it's the right way. You can then back up and redo it. You have more space. Memory limit set to 0 means unlimited. So new objects, enter edit mode. That's handy too when you add a new object, whether it goes into edit mode or to object mode. I just leave it unchecked. It's not too big a deal, but make sure you save your user settings before moving on or closing this out. Add-ons, there's lots of add-ons that I've added. Generally, you can find some great add-ons for free. You just have to kind of search what you want to do, like search tree add-on Blender in Google, and it'll give you add curve sapling, and it'll explain how to use it. Really quick way to make trees. But there's lots of add-ons to do little things. I especially recommend extra objects. It adds extra objects that you can create pretty easily. Pipe joints for making curved cylinders and regular solids. Those are all very, very handy. And add curve extra objects is handy as well for some more intermediate stuff. And then there's themes and where to save things, and then some other system things that you don't really need to worry about. So let's save that and close it out. Now, the whole reason I went into that, sorry, got off topic, was to have this option, device, GPU compute, right here. Since I set that in my user preferences, I can now render with my graphics card. And it's a lot faster, it's a lot nicer. I like it a lot more. But for some things, if it's a really complex render and you think it might overtax your GPU, you might want to switch this to CPU. If your render keeps failing, just switch it to CPU. It'll take a lot longer, but it'll eventually get done. And that's the basics. Just remember sampling right here, this render amount. Change that to get a nicer render. I leave mine at 50 just to test the water, and then slowly move it up until it looks right. I'm not going to mention clamp right now. This is just beginning stuff. So then here's your scene and your different layers. We'll get into that in a minute. Here's more of your scene settings. These are your world settings, and we can add. This is a good tip. I have this in the resources. How to add a scene for better lighting, like how we did this, and it's just pretty plain and drab. We're going to hit Use Nodes, and right here for color, we want to put an HDR, High Dynamic Range image, in here. So it's going to tell it where to light from, so it looks more realistic, because any scene, there's light bouncing everywhere, back and forth, walls, ceiling, and you don't notice it because our eyes have evolved and adapted to how it is. But a lot of times you'll make something cool and then you render it out and it doesn't look right. It's because you have this gray world with one light source. You need a real looking world. So here we hit Use Nodes, and now we have a background. The color, we don't want it to be just gray. We want it to be a high dynamic range image, an HDR or HDRi. So we're going to click this little button here and go to Environment Texture. Now we have an open, and obviously that's where we're going to go get it. I have some saved in an HDRi folder, and we're just going to put, how about Rome Market on here. Now when we do this, see, we have a marketplace that has all the different types of light bouncing everywhere. So if you set up a scene in this, it's going to look a lot more realistic because it actually gives the illusion of an outdoor scene with the color and the lighting being more correct than just a gray, drab world that you're originally set with. And again, that's in the World button here in the Properties window. And then we clicked Use Nodes, and then let's see, we clicked this button here on the color, and we went to Environment Texture, Open, and you're going to have to navigate to where you downloaded one, and added it there. And I put a link in the resources for a bunch of free HDRIs. You'll just download those, unzip them, and you'll use the .hdr file here. See, roammarket.hdr. They're really handy for getting a lot better lighting pretty quickly and easily. Then we have your object stuff. You don't really need to worry about too much of this. To begin with, you have your constraints, modifiers. Modifiers help you do some really neat things, and it's a little bit more intermediate. We're not going to get into that to begin with. See how I added more polygons to that to smooth it out? This is one that most people use a lot, and we'll definitely take a look at that, just not right now. See, that's what modifiers do. You add them to an object that you've made to change something about it. And they're very handy, and it saves you a lot of time, and it's not really considered cheating because you're trying to get things to look a certain way, and the fastest way you can do that lets you really spend more time refining what you're doing. So instead of making that ball out of this cube by going in and changing it a whole lot, I can just use a modifier to get the same result in just a few seconds. And again, this is like your mesh information. You can change a few things. You don't really need to go in here to begin with. You will eventually. And then here's another important one. This is materials. This is where the colors for your object are going to come in, where you would put a texture to make it look, say, like a brick wall or like black painted metal that's been all scratched up. You would do that here. And if you're in cycles, there's Blender Render, Blender Game, Cycle Render. That's what's used to create your images. When you render something out, when you're done with it and you've set it up how you want and you think it's going to look great, you render it. This is what engine it uses. Blender Render was the original one. You set it right up here at the top. Blender Render was the original one, and it did really well, but then Cycles Render does a little bit more, and it allows you to use nodes, which are pretty interesting as well, which we'll get into once I actually model something. So this is where you add those materials, and there's a few different steps that go along with making realistic materials. We're not really going to get too into that. We will just a little bit today. Here's textures. Right now we have the environment texture on our world. It's in there twice because I did it twice for you. And then you can change things as you add textures. You're not really going to be too concerned with that to begin with. This is your particle systems where you would add like hair, or you could do grass. You can even do whole objects as particles to scatter like debris around. If a tornado hit, you could use that here, or to add leaves to a tree or fruit to a tree. It's pretty handy and pretty neat. And then here's physics. I use physics mostly to simulate cloth, like a tablecloth or a bedspread, or you can use it to drop an object on a plane so that it's sitting right on it, so you don't have to just nudge it until it looks just right on top of it. You can just drop it and it'll be sitting there all ready to go. And we'll get into that just a little bit as well. So what else is there? Well, I don't really use the timeline too much except with physics, like I said, to drop things or to simulate cloth. So I usually leave this on my node editor because I like adding materials. This is where you do it. It's kind of like a little blueprint where you can add nodes. And I'll show that to you definitely. We'll do just a little bit with nodes. There's a text editor where you can do some scripting, movie clip editor, if you're making an animated movie. UV image editor. That's with materials. UV say this is one side of my box, and I wanted to paint an image on that one side of my box. This is kind of where I would do that. The UV is the two-dimensional image of this object. If I was to take this and slice it up and lay it out flat, that would be my UV. It's your XY coordinates for this, and that's how you add textures onto things. We're not really going to get into that in this video, though. Just if you're wondering what UV means, it's the flattened out polygon structure of this box that you can then add a texture to. If that doesn't make sense, I've got some really good resources down in the comments that you can take a look at afterwards. And then Logic Editor for the game engine, which, I mean, you can get prototyping with the game engine. I haven't used it so much because there's more powerful things available that are just as easy to learn, like Unreal Engine 4 and things like that. User preferences, which you don't really need to go into. You can do it from File at the top. That's what we were just in, only it'll put it here in your window. See, I mean, you don't really need that. You can go into it from File. Here's File Browser. It opens up automatically when you need it. And Python console. Just don't really worry about that unless you really want to get into it. You probably need more than I'm going to show you. Okay, now that's pretty much everything. There's this window here. These are your different modes. You can just leave it in default to begin with. There's compositing, which is tweaking your rendered image after you've made it. So once you've got everything set up with your model, like if I like this cube, I'll render it, and I can do that by pressing F12. See, it renders it out with 50 samples. I have my cube. Then I would go into compositing, and I could change a few things. Like I could add how it gets dark around here. You know, it's kind of like a cheap way to describe it would be Instagram. It takes your image and it tweaks it up, and you can add different effects to it. A lot better than Instagram, though. And then UV editing, again, this is where I would kind of apply my textures and make sure they look right. But we're going to leave it on default. F11 will get you out of this and back into it. Or you can go down here and click and go to 3D view. This is where you set what these windows are. And then I'll just show you, if you like this image, you can go to Image, Save as Image, or you can just hit F3. But that's generally an overview of everything you have here. Down here, these are important too. We did the modes, Object Mode and Edit Mode. That's where you'll do most of your work. This one here shows solid, or you can show the wireframe. See, now I just have the outline of the box so that I can see through it if there's stuff back here that I want to check out. Or you can do texture, which will just show you the basic texture if you've added one. And then material, which is generally the same. It's a little bit different. We don't need to go into the specifics of how right now. And then rendered, which shows it rendering with the Cycles engine. And if you have a bunch of stuff and a bunch of lights, this can crash your computer. It has mine in some more complex scenes. Because every time you move or do anything, it re-renders it up to 25 samples that I have in my settings. Remember, we set that here in your Properties window under Sampling. This preview is what you see in your viewport. With Shift Viewport, Shift-C takes you into that. And you can even leave it at 10 if you just need a basic. You know, it's not too bad. But most of the time, if you want to see your materials in different colors, just leave it on Material, and it'll show you the textures that you've added. And it won't take forever. This one here is what things rotate around. That's a little bit more intermediate. When you get to a specific problem that would help with, I would learn more about it. Whether, here, let's just, we have two boxes now. We're going to select both of them, holding Shift and right-click. Remember, right-click selects. This one, that one, hold Shift and right-click, and it selects both of them. Now, if we hit R to rotate, see they're both rotating around a center point. If we switch this to individual origins, that little orange dot there, that's their individual origin. See, it's pretty much in the center. And we switch this here to individual origins. Now we'll hit R. Now they both rotate around that spot. So it's a way to have a little more control about what things rotate around. Here's my 3D cursor that you can move with the left mouse button. And I'll just stick it over here, somewhere in space. It's way over there. I can select 3D cursor. And now if I hit rotate, they're rotating around that. That's a little advanced. You don't really need to remember that until you have a specific need for it. I use it quite a bit, and period and comma switches between 3D cursor and median point. So then this here, this is called your transform tool. These little arrows. And we have it set to transform. If we switch it here to this one, this is your rotation tool. I don't really ever use that. I just use the R button. But you can grab it and transform and rotate things around the axes. See, the red one will rotate around the x-axis, blue around the z, and the green around the y. It's pretty fun. And then this one is your scale tool. Because it has the little boxes here, we'll make it bigger on the z, bigger on the x, bigger on the y. Now see, look at these two. They're both getting bigger, and they're also moving away from each other. That's because we have this set to, oh, it's on bounding box center, okay. If we set it to individual origins, now they move towards each other because they're spreading out from their own center, not their median point. And generally I just leave this on median point because it can cause a few weird problems if you have it other ways. Not really going to go into what. But transform tool, so now it's turned off, hit it again to turn it back on. Let's put it back on the arrows to move things along your axes, or you can just grab with right click. Whoops, grab the lamp. And now you might grab something and move it and think that you're moving it along the x-axis, when really, look at it, it's moved back a bit. And that's because whatever your view is, you grab something and it's going to move it around your view. So it's not actually moving it in this world, it's moving it around this screen. Like imagine this is stuck to your windshield of your viewport. Like this is your windshield here. If it's stuck to it, you're just going to move it and slide it along that windshield. And then if you move it this way, you're sliding it along this windshield. See, now it's over here, but I go back this way. I can't bring it closer to me or further away. It's just sliding along this windshield. That's why it's handy to have the transform tool, because you can move it along those axes exactly how you want it. But let's say we rotate it a little bit, and now we don't want to move it along these axes. We want to move it this direction, the way that this faces. We can change that here from global to normal. Now see how that red arrow is pointing that direction? We can grab that, and it's no longer on the x-axis. It's the direction that that side is facing. And that's called a normal. It's the direction that the polygon is facing from its own individual origin. And local is generally the direction that the whole object is facing. That's handy as well. A lot of times it's going to be the same as the normal if you're using simple geometric shapes. Gimbal and view, don't really worry about those too much. There's really no reason you would need view. It's just see how the transform tool now rotates around how I'm looking. It's using my view as the reference for this. So, I mean, if you need that, just pick it up and grab it. And then these are your layers. So let's add a cube, and then let's add another one. Say I have a lot of stuff on my scene. Well, I can take this one and we'll just stick it in the third layer. See, this is layer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You have 20 layers total, but they're numbered across the top and then across the bottom. It's weird how they're grouped into two little groups of 10. You'd think you'd go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. No, it doesn't. It goes across the top and then across the bottom. So I can select this, and then the numbers across the top of my keyboard will switch what will layer this is assigned to. Or they should. Maybe if I'm in edit mode. Okay, I don't really use layers that much. I'll have to find that out, and I'll put it as a pop-up for you, exactly how to switch the layers of these. I do it more by accident than anything else. Sorry, I should have looked at that before. Okay. And then down here you have proportional editing. I use that quite a bit. This is going to change things together. So if I'm just going to drag this one little vertices, but I've got to make it bigger. I'm going to drag this one little vertices. You should see that the others go with it a bit. We can probably see this better. And I do have to say that screen sharing can have some problems. So, all right, we'll grab this one here, and we'll just see how it's moving more than just that one little vertice. It's moving them together proportionally based on that button. Now if I just grab it, since I've turned it off, it's just going to move that one and make it really pointy. But if I don't want it pointy, let's say I'm making an egg, I'll grab this, hit G to grab, and then Z, oh, it's just making a point. So I'll turn on proportional editing, connected. It's going to move everything that's connected to that together, and the mouse wheel makes that circle bigger. Everything inside the circle is what moves. See, now I quickly have an egg. I don't have to drag each one of those. And then I want to turn it back off again when I don't need it. So that's handy. And then this is the snap to. It'll snap things, two other things. If you want to, let's add another circle in here. I want to stick it onto this. I'll hit that and put it on faces. Faces are your polygons. Well, come on. This might be one of those times that it's not going to do it for me. There we go, a little bit. You can see now that it's not just dragging it around my view, it's pushing it onto the egg. Sometimes it works better than others. Not exactly sure why that's not doing so well. Oh well. It could be that they're both spheres. Or it could be because I'm screen sharing. So, alright. We've done everything across the bottom. That's to show a render of what you're currently looking at. And this is basically the same, more for videos. It'll start making frames of your video. Render is just one frame. Now, let's make something. So, let's do, what do I have here? A goblet. I can show you something neat. I'm hitting Shift A here. Shift A to add something. Or you can go right here to add, down on the bottom. It's the same thing. Shift A is a lot easier because then you don't have to move your mouse. Let's add just to, how about a cube? Let's start with a table. And now we've got this cube, we need to edit it. So let's switch into edit mode. Hit Tab to switch into edit mode. Or you can go down here and switch your mode. Now, these three buttons here are if I want to select vertices. That's this first one. See, now I can just select these little dots that connect our sides. Or edges. That's a whole side between two polygons. Or you can select faces. Now I have a dot here, 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 and I'm selecting the whole sides. And these are pretty handy as well. And this one here lets you select things that you can't see from your current view. Now I've got this back one selected, bottom. I generally leave that off because if I need to select something on the back, I'll go into wireframe mode. Remember, you can get to that here and go to wireframe. See, now it's just clear and I can select those back faces just the same. Another quick way to get into wireframe and out of it is to hit Z. Z in, Z out. I'll use that a lot. Now, to move around, if you don't want to rotate, see, like what if I'm working on this backside and it's really far away. I'm going to zoom in. Now it's down here. I can't really work down here very well. Now it's weird. You can pan if you hold Shift and middle mouse button. See? Now I can zoom in here. Holding Shift and middle mouse button, and then just middle mouse button to rotate. Shift middle mouse button, and then middle mouse button to rotate again. And if I'm really lost and I can't figure out how to get back, say I can't see anything, I'm really lost way out here, and everything's really small, come up here and just select your cube. See, whatever's got this little highlight on it is selected. Select your object, and then on your number pad, hit period. And it'll just center onto whatever's selected. So if you really screw up what you're rotating around and everything's weird and upside down, hit period. And it won't reset which direction it is, but it'll at least zoom you into what you're working on. But that did put me back into object mode. So let's switch to edit. And now let's make a table. So we're in face mode, that's fine. Let's grab this top face. Using this transform tool, you can just squish it down. Now to unselect that top face, hit A. Nothing selected. Hit A again. Everything is selected. In edit mode, you select a lot less than in object mode. In object mode, I hit tab to go into object mode. I just have this one box. I can't select faces, I can't select vertices, I can't select edges. So A unselects, deselects everything. A again selects the camera, selects the lamp, selects my box. So let's hit A to unselect everything. Right click to select the box and tab into edit mode. Now that tells it we're just working on this one box. So I hit A to deselect and A again to select everything. My camera, my lamp, they're no longer going to be selected or added to that. If you have a bunch of stuff, you generally want to work on it in edit mode because then you're not going to make changes to the other things. So now I've got my squished box, and now we need some legs. So let's just go here to loop, cut, and slide. Click that and then drag your mouse over. See, now it's going to cut around it this way where the pink line is. It hasn't cut yet. Or we can go to this edge and it's going to cut around that way. Or here, see? Now just click it and we can drag it wherever we want. But don't click again, just right click now. It's going to put it right in the center. Then you can come over here. Now that you've added that loop cut, you can do number of cuts and change that from 1 to 2. 3, 4. See how it adds those in there? Now we have 4 that are evenly spaced on that side of the box. And that'll allow us to add legs. So let's do it again going the other direction. Loop, cut, and slide, that's this button. Drag over to the box, and then click with the left mouse, and then instead of clicking again with the left mouse, click with the right mouse. When that sets it in the center, we can do the number of cuts from 1 to 2, 3, 4. All right. Now that we've got those, let me show you an easier way. I'm going to hit Control-Z, take those away, Control-Z to take those away. And this is the shortcut. I use this a lot. Control-R. And then you drag to the edge. And then you can scroll your mouse wheel up to add those in. left click to slide them, and then instead of left clicking again to set them, I'm going to right click to center. So Control R, scroll my mouse wheel up, left click, right click to center them. And that's a really quick way to do it. I'm going to do it one more time to show you how quick I can go with it. Now I've done the same thing, and I've just clicked a few buttons, hardly moved my hands, and I've got my loop cuts where I need them. And now let's switch to face view so you can see what that did. It added all of these different faces that we can now select. It's going to be a very simple table. It's not going to be the right proportions, but now we see this sticking up. That's the up direction. We want our legs to come out of the bottom. So let's gently rotate to the bottom, and we're in face mode, so let's select that face, and that one, and that one, and that one. Now let's put the legs out on the edge. So let's select these corner faces. Now we want to add legs. Well, you can't just grab this and drag it down. See, it makes it all weird here in the middle. No table does that. The legs come like they're 4 separate pieces to this flat tabletop. So let's extrude it. And you can just hit extrude, region, or individual, or these buttons here. It's not really going to matter since these are separate. See? And they're all facing the same direction. There's different reasons that you would use these, but you don't really need to worry about that just yet. Like if you had a circle, if you want to extrude one side and it would all go the same direction, or if you wanted to extrude it out like it's exploding away from itself, that's different reasons, a little bit more advanced than this needs. I like to just hit E for extrude. Now see this blue line running through it, through the center of my object? That says it's locked to the Z axis. I can't move these from side to side. If I hit Z again, it unlocks it, and now I can have wonky table legs. Let's hit Z again to lock it to the Z axis, and drag those down until they look about right. Now we have one of those little Parsons tables that were so hip in the late 80s. That's great. It looks wonderful. So if we want to dress this up a little bit, maybe we can add something around the top. Let's switch to Edge and select all of these. Now, how did I select all those at once? That's called Loop Select. Alt and right click. Now if I do that here, here. See, it goes all the way around from that edge loop we added. Alt right click. Alt right click. It selects all the way around that edge loop. And since it doesn't know which direction to go, if it should go around the top or if it should go down this way, it stops there at the corner. But Alt Shift right click, Alt Shift right click selects that whole edge, so you don't have to Shift right click each one of these little edges all the way around. Just like that. We've got that all selected. Now, this is a little bit more advanced, but I think it's pretty easy. Control B for bevel. Is that on the W menu? Yes, it is. You can hit W and go to bevel right here, or you can hit Control B. So W is a special menu. And we'll go to bevel. Now just drag this out gently and see how it'll add a bevel there to the table edge. We'll just add one of those on there. Makes it look a bit nicer. Okay, so let's call that good on the table. We got to see how to add edge loops and how to extrude and how to add a bevel. Remember, that's with the W menu. You can go to bevel after you've selected an edge, or you can hit Control B. Whoa, that's too much. right click gets you out of something. If you control B, see, and this is crazy, just right click and it goes away back to how it was. Or if you screw up, control B and you do that, just control Z, remember, just undo. And that button again, well, it's on the object mode right here, undo. And tab goes between object and edit. So we're in edit mode again. And we've got our table. Well, we want it to be a bit bigger. So hit A to deselect everything, and hit A again to select it all. Now let's hit S. Let's scale it. There's also this button here, remember? Scale. I just like to hit S. And then you can just drag this up, and it all gets taller. But what if those legs are tall enough, but we want it to be bigger on top? Well, we can hit S, and then let's make it shorter first. So let's lock it to the Z. Hit Z. Now we drag it and it gets taller, or move towards it and it gets shorter. That's about good. Now we want just the top, so we want the opposite. We want to move everywhere but Z. We don't want it to get taller or shorter. We only want it to get wider on the X and the Y equally. So hit S to start your scaling, but then hit Shift Z. Now see, the legs are not going to get any taller or shorter. It's just going to get wider on the X and the Y axes. So sure, that looks great. That's maybe a coffee table. And then you left click when you're satisfied. So that's scaling. It's really handy as well, and you can do it with as much or as little as you want. See, now I'm scaling just that one piece. Or I can scale just these two. Whoa, it's getting crazy. So then we have our table. Let's go ahead and add a cup. And this will show you some more intermediate things, which are pretty simple and pretty easy. First, let's pull that up. So, a cup, well, it's symmetrical around all sides. Let's do like a wine glass, like a goblet. It's symmetrical around all sides. So we will just add an object. Well, plane, cube, there's not really... Let's add it in object mode. You have a bit more options in object mode. See? Plane, cube, circle, gemstones, pipe joints, solids. These little plugs mean these are add-ons that I showed earlier. No, there's no goblet, so how would we make this symmetrical? You could add, let's say, you add a sphere, and you go in here, and that's that Alt-right click to select a ring, remember? And then C is brush select. It adds this little circle so I can brush in what I want. Oh, whoops. Middle mouse button on C deselects. And then right click gets you out of it. Or remember, Z takes you into wireframe. So I can line this up and go into Z, and B is box select. So I click B and then I drag with the left mouse button to select everything under it. And while I'm in wireframe mode, it selects the back sides as well. See, I've got the whole top selected. But if I was in solid, do B box select, it's only going to select that, what's visible. So that's why wireframe can be handy. Okay, so I'm in wireframe and box selected. Oh, it missed those. See, so I'm going to hit C to brush select and brush those in. Right click to get out of brush select. And then let's just hit X and delete these vertices. Now they're gone. Okay, now I've got a bowl, and let's Hit Z to go back to solid mode. Oh no, it's hard to see in there because this table is coming in. Switch to vertice mode. Maybe grab that one and drag it down to make the stem. It's seeming pretty hard, and it's seeming like it's pretty hard. Now we've got a point. How do we make that better? Well, let's add a loop cut in here. What? It's not letting us add a loop cut. Well, that's because these are all triangles. They're tris. 4 sides are quads, and the loop cut knows how to cut between them. But with tris, does it go from this side to this side all the way around? Or does it go from these long sides all the way around? Of course, we see that and say, yes, it should, but the computer doesn't know how to do that, especially with some more complex models that could be made out of triangles. So that's why you generally want to work in quads, 4 sides. So we can't do that to make this any wider. It's getting difficult. Don't understand exactly what we should be doing. Let's delete it. So I'll show you something cool here. We're in object mode now. There are ways to hide this. Let's hit H to hide it. But if you're going to hide something, you definitely have to unhide it. That's Alt-H. H to hide, Alt-H to unhide. But we do want it hidden, and now Shift-S, cursor to center. That's going to move your 3D cursor. This is where new things are added. And then Shift-A to add. Let's just put a plane in there, a nice little plane, and switch to edit mode. Right here, you can switch to edit mode or just tab. So now we're in edit mode, and we know it's edit mode because we can select individual vertices. Let's just hit A however many times to select everything, and then delete vertices. That's gone. But look up here. We still have a slot for plane. It's still in our outliner, even though there's nothing here. All we have is this little orange dot. We switch to object mode, we've still got that little orange dot that we can move around. So it still has an origin, even though there's nothing there. It's kind of like making an empty box with no object in it that we then can change how we see fit. So there's a few different ways to look at this. And I showed you ortho by hitting 5 and perspective by hitting 5 again on your numpad. Well, now let's look at some others. 7 is the top, looking top down. And to help you see this, I'm going to switch to object mode. I'm going to unhide this table. See, here's the top of our table. 1 is the front. I'm looking at it straight from the front with 1 point of perspective. 3 is from the right. And because it's symmetrical, it looks the same as the front does. So let's leave it on the front, and let's make sure our plane is the only thing selected. See, I just clicked here in the outliner to select it, and let's tab into edit mode. So G to grab, nothing moves. S, nothing scales. There's nothing here. Well, let's make something. I'm in vertices mode. And this is a really neat trick. I can hold Control and left click to add a vertice. So let's put one here. And then if I keep holding Control while that's selected and click again, we'll put one there. Now it connected those with an edge. So keep holding Control and keep clicking, left clicking, and go maybe there, and there, and then we'll come up and do this. And if you can tell, I'm starting to draw half of a goblet for a wine glass, so we can have a little wine at our table. Now I'll select that first one. We're going to spin this around and create it really quickly. It's going to go very fast. I just have this one side, and I want it all to spin all the way around this one point that I have selected. So I'm going to hit Shift S and move my 3D cursor to the selected vertice. See how that jumped right there? Now I need to select everything. So I'm going to hit A until everything's selected, all of my vertices connected with an edge. If I move this around, all I've got is a little line. But now I'm going over here, and it's this little button here, the spin button. I'm going to hit that, and I get this ugly mess. Well, it didn't spin it around the right vertice. Right. So, but I have these properties down here. Under spin, 9 steps, 90-degree angle, the center, don't worry about that, we told it the 3D cursor, and the axes. Well, that's based on my viewport. It spun it around the way I was looking at it. That's all wrong. Let's change this to 0, and I can tab down to Y and make that 0, and I want it to spin around the Z-axis, so let's make that 1. Now it's like a quarter of a wine glass. That's a bit better. Oh, angle is 90, so let's change that. You can just click in here and drag your mouse to watch it spin all the way around. And that's pretty good for a wine glass. That was pretty fast and easy. It's got a stem, it's got a base, it's all one piece, it's full of polys. You can add more steps in here to smooth it out even more. See, now there's 16 faces all the way around each side. And yes, there's 16 faces on this little tiny stem. If we zoom in here, you can see them. So that's a lot better. That looks much, much better. So now one thing that we have to do is this scene where it's connected. Well, if we take this down to 359, enter, you can see it's not connected. So let's put that back at 360. Now they're just kind of overlapping, they're touching. We need to stick them together. And it'll do this automatically for you. If you just select everything, hit A however many times you need, and then hit this magic button here, remove doubles, remove 29 vertices. And now it is stuck together. So, that's great, but look at how it's reflecting light on the inside. That's not exactly what we want, because you're not going to look in and have it reflect negative light back at you. That's because these are the backs of the normals. And let me show you what a normal is. Don't worry about what I just clicked. It's just to show the direction that each of these polygons is facing. And that is called the normal. So here, this will help demonstrate something else. My transform tool is pointing with my world. See, that lines up with this on the ground, that lines up with this. But if I switch it here from global to normal, now my Z is pointing the direction of that little blue line, the same direction that that polygon is facing. And that's what that means. It just helps you line up how you're dragging something, and you use those for different reasons. So you can see they're all pointing to the outside, and all of these, well, there's nothing in here. So it's going to reflect light in a weird way if we render it. On the bottom's fine because we drew that. So now let's fix that, and I'm going to show you a modifier for this. So you'll actually use a modifier. Let's go into object mode so that you can see this immediately. And click on this little wrench over here for your modifiers. Add modifier, and we're going to solidify this wine glass. And that's going to take that one flat surface that was just one polygon thick, almost infinitely thin, and it's going to solidify it, make it solid. If you can see, there's a little bit of an edge around here now. Now you can see we've added these polygons around this edge, and they all point up, and now we have the ones on the inside pointing in. That's much better. It will reflect light normally. Now with this modifier, it's still not applied. I'm in edit mode so that I could show you these normals that have been added. This is my thickness. So if we click here and drag this, you see how thick everything gets. Thicker, thicker. But we don't need it very thick at all. 0.01 is nice. 0.01. Just a little bit, since it's a very thin wine glass. And apply. Oh, we can't apply anything in edit mode. See, you get an error message. So let's tab into object mode, and we'll apply our modifier. And that's how you use modifiers. They're pretty simple once you know what each one does. And let's use one more. So this is still pretty flat looking. You wouldn't pick this up at Garden Ridge or wherever you shop for cups. And especially because it has all these flat sides. You could come up here and click the smooth button. In object mode, it's right there. Now it's reflecting light a bit better as the average between the surrounding faces. But there's still some jaggies. I mean, here you see some corners. It'll do for a video game, I guess, if it's on the Nintendo 64, but it's not going to be great for making a realistic render. So let's switch this back to flat, and I'll go ahead and show you how to do that in edit mode. Remember, we tab from object mode to edit mode. Hit A to deselect and A again to select everything. Now I'm going to turn off those normals. And let's go to shading. It's this tab here. It's the first time we've had to switch tabs over here all the way to the left. Shading UVs and switch that to smooth. That's the same thing we did in object mode and flat. And another handy one is the flip direction. Look, now all my polygons are backwards. Those little blue lines showing you the direction of the faces, well, okay. That's from the one on the inside. It's punching through those normals and displaying on the outside. But it's not going to reflect light. If you ever get any of those, it can be a pain to fix. Select everything and click Recalculate. That's going to determine the direction that your normals should be facing and get them facing the right direction again. So we need this to have a lot more faces so that there's lots more places that it can bend and look more realistic. Let's use the modifier, like I showed you in the beginning, subdivision surface. You'll probably use this a lot. It's very, very handy. See, I hit it and already it looks different. It's weird. One time divided each polygon by each face, or by each edge. So each edge is divided into two for each polygon. See, you can kind of see how there's a bunch more polygons. It's more curved. This base is a little scalloped and weird. That's okay, we can deal with it. Let's hit this here, view. Let's hit that to 2. Now there's even more. And 3, now you can hardly even see them. One more, 4, oh, they're so infinitesimally tiny. But then let's look up here and see faces. 99,000 polygons. That also includes the polygons for the table, which was, what, 15? So 99,000 polygons in this one goblet. That's going to be very difficult for anything to render, to use. You can't put it many places at all. So let's turn this back down to 3, 2, 1. Yeah, that'll probably be okay. Before we hit apply on object mode, let's go back into edit. Tab to go to edit. And this button here, we'll see how it shows you the polygons around it. That'll just smooth them to the modifier, so it's easier to work with. This kind of comes in a bit too much right here. It looks really fragile. So if I just add an edge loop, and you can do that on the Tools tab with Loop, Cut, and Slide. I don't ever do that, so I didn't know exactly where that was right off the bat. Loop, Cut, and Slide, and then go to it. I just Control R. See, I got that little tiny purple line right there in the middle. It's going to cut it right there. I'm going to scroll my mouse wheel up so there's 2, and click, and right click to center them. Whoop. Now it's centered those. So let's, well, now it's not letting me select them. This can get kind of, there we go. That just turns off the modifier in edit mode, this button here, so that we can work with it a little bit easier. Let's go and let's grab it, and let's just drag it up a little bit. Let's grab this one here, let's just drag it down a little bit. And that might not be the best way. Undo, and I'll show you a better way. Alt, right click to select the whole loop, and then let's just slide that edge up. Slide edge. Because this stem is not all completely straight on the z-axis, it would deform a little bit as I dragged it up, but this slide edge is going to slide it along those other edges so that it's uniform. So let's slide that one up, And then let's select this one, Alt right click, and slide that edge down. Just slides it along the already occurring shape. Like if I was to add one here, and I go up and down, see how it like deforms it? And then I slide that edge, it's just going to slide it along the shape. But I didn't want one there anyway. So now let's look at this again. Oh, it's still deforming that weird. Alright, we'll do it a different way. Select both of those and Shift E to add a crease. And that just tells it we want less of that rounding off here along this edge. So now that's a pretty good goblet. Let's go ahead and apply that. And then, well, now we need it to be clear. We need it to be glass. So let's add some materials to it. Let's see. All right, first let's set the origin to the geometry right here. That puts that little orange dot in the center of what you made, and it just makes it easier to move things around. Sometimes that gets lost if you're moving things in edit mode. Set origin, origin to geometry. So up here, remember from the beginning, we're going to click this one here for materials. And there's nothing because we haven't added anything. Let's just hit new, and now you've got all these options. Preview shows you what your material is going to look like. And diffuse, color, roughness, normal, volume, displacement, what does all this mean? Don't worry about it. Just leave the color on white. We're going to change this surface from diffuse, which is just the basic general material, general color, to glass right here. And look at our preview. Now it looks like glass. Let's give it a little bit of roughness, what, like 0.01, just a little. And the IOR is, it's kind of like how thick the glass appears. So we can change that to like 1.2 to make it a thinner glass. And then, now look, we can Shift Z, remember, to show it as rendered. And this is only with 10 samples. Now, it's looking a lot better. It's all selected, we're in object mode. Let's go ahead and hit smooth. Now that smooth looks a lot better. Let's look at it again in rendered mode. Even better. Now to show you what I was talking about, let's change this to 1.7. How it changes how light refracts through it. It looks like a marble. It's so thick. 1.2 does a little bit better for thin glass. 1.45 the default. That's good for like wine jars and things like that. See, you can see the edge through it a bit more. 1.45. It bends it to the glass. And you'll see this black ring here and here from light going through it. That's because it's so thin and it's refracting from different places that don't have light coming from all sides. And now you can really see these little speckles here and how it's really rough. That's because it's only 10 samples for each pixel. When we render it, it'll look a lot nicer. But first, let's do one more thing, and let's add the tablecloth. So let's take this and let's just zoom it out of the way a little bit. And now I'm going to click the top of my tabletop, which should put that 3D cursor right on top of the table, and Shift A, add a plane. It puts this plane here, and let's hit S to scale it. Just scale it to where it would look like it would look good. And then R to rotate, and let's hit Z to lock it to the Z-axis and rotate it around a little bit so that it'll fall over. We're going to simulate some cloth. Let's drag this up, and let's add a color to it. hit New here on Materials, and this color, just click on that white, and let's make it a blue something. Just click in there. Now it's going to be blue. If we hit Shift-C to look at it, yeah, it's blue. Now, we need some places for it to bend. So let's tab into Edit Mode, and let's go to Subdivide. This is almost the same thing as Subsurface. It's just not going to round out the corners like Subsurf does. So we'll hit it once, twice, 3 times. Okay, and let's go to Modifiers, and let's add that subdivision surface. 1, 2 times. Yeah, that's nice. So now we've got this kind of tablecloth. Let's add that solidify modifier as well that we did on the wine glass to give it a little bit of surface. And now we need to add some physics. So we're going to click Cloth. You can leave this all basically how it is. You might want to click on Cloth Collision. You might want to click Self Collision right here. The quality steps here and quality steps here are important, but it really slows down your computer. So let's just leave those at 5 for right now and 2, just what it was basically set on. So pretty much all we did was click Cloth. That applies a cloth modifier, physics modifier to this. And if we go back to our modifier tab with the little wrench, you'll be able to see it here down at the bottom. Now, this is also important. Let's switch this here to the timeline, and we can hit play, and it'll start our physics simulation. Well, nothing's happening. Number 1, let's hit back to the beginning. We're in edit mode. It's not going to do it in show it to us in edit mode. So let's go to Object and let's hit play again. It balloons up like a pillow. So we hit pause and we go back to the beginning. That's because our cloth simulation is here at the bottom of our modifiers. So this button, we'll just move it up to before we solidify it. And that will get rid of that pillowing problem. Now we hit play, and it just falls straight through our table. That's your next problem. Let's right-click to select the table. We need to go to Physics, it's this little bouncing ball, and select Collision. And that should fix that problem. See, now it just folds right over our table. And the more polygons you add to it with that Subdivide button and the Subsurface modifier, the better that's going to look. We can just click that and hit Smooth. Now that'll look pretty good. Now we have a tablecloth, so let's move our wine glass back over here. And let's scale that down with S. Move it down with our transform tool. And let's add a rigid body. That means it's just a hard thing. Now turn the outline green to show that we have this on it. Change this whole, the shape, to mesh. And we should be able to hit play from here. Huh, it should fall. Oh, no, it is inactive. That's odd. Well, I should have made it fall onto the table, and it didn't. Oh, maybe it did. No, it did not. I mean, with that, that's generally how I place things on other things. We'll just gently move it down until it's on there. Now we've got a wine glass, and using everything that we just did, let's make a plate real quick. How about? So, remember these perfect views? 7 is the top, 1 is the front, 3 is the right. Let's go in here and add a mesh, just a plane, tab into edit mode, hit delete and all the vertices so that we can just hold control and click to add, oops, vertices. There. We have to be in vertex mode. 1, 2, let's turn off our transform tool right here. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, that's great. Now let's select that one, Shift S to move our cursor to the center, Shift S to move our cursor to the selected, sorry. A to select all of it, and now let's spin it. And we have to change our axes. X is 0, Y is 0, Z is going to be 1. Go back up here, it's still set to 360 and 19. Let's change that to 20, how about? There's a nice plate. And then let's select it all with A and remove doubles. Now it's all attached. Modifiers, add a modifier, subdivision surface, and 2 should be enough. There's a nice looking plate. Let's tab into object mode and apply that. This is just kind of using everything that we've done. There we go. Now let's set the origin to the geometry and turn our transform tool back on right here. That's why you don't see those arrows. And we'll just move it down because I'm not going to bother with the physics right now. Here we go, and let's make it look nice. I click the material button up here, right there, and then I'll click new, and let's make it a little glossy. So down here, where we have the timeline, let's go to Node Editor and drag this up and scroll wheel in to zoom it in. Now we have a diffuse. And this is all I'm going to do with nodes right now. Diffuse connects to the surface output. So we want some glossy on that as well. So Shift A to add, just like in all the other modes, a shader. We're going to mix that diffuse with a glossy. So I just dragged it onto that line and it added it in from this side and out. We have 2 places to come into and 1 to go out of, so it's going to mix diffuse and something else. Let's take a glossy right here and drag that to the shader. Now see, my preview changed to show this pearlescent. Let's turn this roughness down to 0.02. Now it's nice and glossy. You can't tell too much here because I have my preview sampling set to 10. But that should look like some nice glossy porcelain when we render. So let's hit Shift Z to get out of this. That's all I'm doing with nodes for right now. And we'll hit 0 on our number pad. This is your render window, what's going to be rendered. And what I've done is, see how it moves with me? I've set that up. So this little plus sign here brings up your properties shelf. And one of these options under View is Lock Camera to View. So on yours, you'll move it and you'll go out of it. You'll hit 0 and you're back in it, and you try to move it and you go out. So go up here, hit that plus sign, and under View, you can hit Lock Camera to View. It's a lot easier to use that way. Then you just hit 0, and you can move it to exactly how you want it. This is pretty quick and dirty. I would spend a lot more time making the table and the tablecloth, things like that, scaling them up, tweaking a little bit. But we set our view. We've got our HDRi on. Remember under the world how we set that. All of our nodes, and then we're going to hit F12 to render. And I've got it set to 50, so it'll go fairly quick, and there'll still be some noise here. And that looks pretty good. We got a tablecloth, we've got a plate, we've got a cup. Let's go back to the render, the camera here, and we can change this to 100, and it'll give us a better quality. Some of this light here, that's from light bouncing after it passes through the cup. This is called clamp. Right here, clamping direct light from the light source. You don't really ever want to do that. It's not going to fix this problem. It's just going to make things really dark. Clamping indirect is going to get rid of these bounced light fireflies. I like to put that at maybe a 0.6 just to help get rid of some of those. And we're going to render at 100. Let's see if it looks a lot better. And there you go. We've got a cup. All those little speckly fireflies are gone. There's still a few in here that we could set our samples up even higher to get rid of, but I'm pretty happy with just how this is. It looks good. We could add an image instead of just this blue under here. So let's hit F11 to get out of the render, and 0 again to get out of our camera. Now we're on our tablecloth. Say we wanted to add an image. Shift A, go to Texture, Image Texture. And we drag this color here to that color there, and we would open up our image. And that gets more into UV mapping and things like that. It's a little more difficult. I'm not really going to go into it here. I think this is probably a good place to stop. Maybe we can do some more with nodes and materials next time. I look forward to your feedback because I don't know if this was useful or not. I added some links in the properties about where to find some free textures, where to find some free HDR images, where to find a great place to get models that you can look at on BlendSwap. I'm going to upload this blend file to BlendSwap if it allows me. I don't have an account there where I've uploaded anything yet, but I'll try to put this on there for you so you can download it and look at what I've done with it in a little more detail. So definitely check out the resources. Let me know if this is something you liked, if it was helpful, what you didn't like, and hopefully I can do this live every Saturday. Also let me know if there was any problem with the audio, with the video, if it was too loud, too quiet, things like that will really help me to do better next time. Thanks, I really appreciate everyone who stopped in to take a look, and that's it. Bye.